Welcome to the Uzlaga Saga podcast, where we explore spiritual beliefs from around the world through a Norse and Germanic lens. Saga is the Old Norse word meaning story or tale, but it also refers to utterance, what is said, an oral account of the oldest tales of a people. Additionally, Saga is the name of a goddess. Uzlaga is the Proto-Germanic ancestor of the Old Norse word urlog, meaning fate or destiny, but its oldest meanings refer to natural or primordial law, the fundamental laws of nature that are a part of all of us. Some even theorize that the original name for our ancient religion was actually urlog or Uzlaga. The purpose of this podcast is to provide educational content based on the latest historical evidence and to explore personal experiences from cultures around the world. It aims to serve as a spiritual guide for those interested in the thoughts, feelings, and practices of pagan, heathen, and animist mindsets from around the world, both in contemporary times and among ancient cultures. We welcome guests with similar or opposing viewpoints to discuss relevant topics and offer an open platform for sharing and questioning holistic spiritual ideas. On to the episode. And we have now the access to do these things like no one else before in maybe 3,000 years since the Bronze Age.
We all share so much, regardless of where we're from, regardless of what path. We share this world, we share this planet, we share these feelings.
I think it's very beautiful. It just, for me, it just goes to show like that this is the right way, like for me. And it speaks to my core. And yeah, that's where I'm at.
This is really a growing phenomenon and a returning phenomenon, and it's probably a direct response to what we're experiencing these days.
Most of the challenges that I personally see with other people, and especially when it comes to myself, is not living in the present moment.
Everything is based on action and reaction, how you feel, how that interaction is with the spirits. And by pushing your boundaries, because once you push and you go through those hard things, you shed versions of you no longer need, and you bring in transformation.
Yeah, welcome alle sammen. We have a very special first episode for you all today. This is the first episode of the new podcast, Uzlaga Saga, and we have a great team here. Quite a few people who I've known for quite some time, and we're all very knowledgeable and unique and a lot of different things in our own ways. So thank you all of you guys for being. And we're going to have more of like a round table discussion type thing. Dustin is going to lead most of that. Aphelion Drif, do you want to introduce yourself first and what that name means actually? Because I think we all have a little stage name for the five of us at least. Would you want to introduce yourself and explain that?
Right, not a problem. Thank you, Thor. So, yes, my name is Dustin. Online, obviously, I'm going by Aphelion Drift. Aphelion, to explain, is when the Earth is at its farthest point from the sun. So farthest point from the sun, it could be anything astrological at its farthest point, returning back to. Drift obviously is taken from the Old Norse language and the gathering. So therefore, pairing the two of them would be gathering far from the sun.
Awesome. Perfect. And we wanted this first podcast to be just an introduction to all of you guys. First of all, in the future ones, we're going to be having some very exciting, famous guests on, but today it's just us, and we're going to focus specifically on paganism and spirituality and how the everyday person in 2024 can get into these things, and how we transfer it from the textbooks and the historical sources into our daily lives, and how we can use it to benefit our lives. So, what are some of the things that you'd like us to start with?
So some of the things when getting into the questioning and the daily pagan practices or holistic earth-based animist practices, which I'm sure we all agree to some extent on, would be, for myself anyways, is more reverence to that which we find divine in nature. So obviously the gods have more of translation, a literal translation, and giving reverence to those sort of things is my best way of, on the daily, communing, I guess you'd say, giving reciprocity there too.
Should we go around then? Introduce everybody, locations, interests, studies, accomplishments.
Typically, I would just start at the top and work my way around. Ryan is sort of our behind-the-scenes man of mystery when it comes to our tech support type stuff. So, Crow, would that be on you?
Sure, that's fine. All right, so I'll give you, I guess, the rundown quickly of my history. So my practice is mostly shamanic based. I come through the line of Alberto Villotto with the Four Winds Society, who he learned shamanism from the Cueros in Peru. They're descendants of the Incas. I'm taught by Shaman Silverwolf, who is a student of Alberto's, and down to me. I also have various other teachers, such as Marcelo Lobos, Robert Thurman of Tibetan House USA. I've learned from Peter Whitefeather Redheart. I've also learned from Justo Apaza, Maestro Justo Apaza. I've learned Chumpy Stones and all that through them. I've been practicing magic and paganism and all that pretty much since I can remember, because as I develop along my spiritual path further and further and further along, I realize all the silly things that I used to do as a kid actually was something. Like, that is the epitome of my spiritual practice. It's like, wait a minute, that's like folk magic? Like, people did that? I thought it was just some crazy kid, you know? So, but I walked the path of a shaman. My shamanic name was given to me, was actually Mystical Crow, is the full thing, because my spiritual path is made up of various practices, everything from being a seer, divination, to nature, animistic ways, pagan gods and goddesses. I have some druidry under my belt, all that stuff. So he gave me Crow because crows collect shiny things, and my spiritual path is my collection of shiny things. So I reside here in New Jersey. You can hear the New Yorker on my voice. Yes, I'm from New York. No, I can't turn it off. So I've tried. I can't turn it off. But my goal on my spiritual path, again, walking the path of a shaman, it's the balance between the dark and the light. It's the role of a shaman is to commune with spirits between this world and other worlds. Trance states are something I'm in and out of all the time, and it makes me loopy. Thor has gotten to experience that recently. My medicine practice is very energy-based, animistic-based. I'm also training to be a death doula and all that stuff. Daily for my pagan practices is, I try to do it with my family and my kids. And while my moon rituals may be a couple of days early or a couple of days late, my heart and soul are still in the practices. I own Sacred Temple Wellness. It's actually second generation. I'm owning this business now. My mentor and his wife owned it for an extensive number of years, about 15 years, give or take. And I've now been given that business. I own that. And my goal is to help others. I walk with them through their shadows so they can remember to reconnect to these animistic energies as well. I teach Mune Key. I'm one of the first people, Alberto and his wife, Marcella. I was part of the first grouping of initiating into Mune Key and then starting to spread that into the world. That's the Coeros, their rites of awakening, so to speak. And I've been teaching that now. As far as my pagan practices go, like I said, daily, I try to get them done. The things that take longer sometimes are, I try to get every holiday in and all that kind of stuff, but I involve my family as much as possible. So that's a quick, I guess, rundown to start, right?
Yeah, it's setting the stage for everyone else. I think Christina has probably more experience and time in it than all of us. So
Yeah,
we'll go on, but you guys feel free to just...
Yeah, I'll just keep going, so interrupt me
Keep
if
going.
I keep...
One thing I'd maybe want to ask everybody as it gets around, how did you get into the Norse stuff? We all met through my channel. So add that as well, just I want everybody to speak quickly. How did you get into the Norse stuff, and what attracted you to that?
Okay, so I actually got into the Norse stuff mostly actually because of one of my soul sisters, Amanda. She's very big into the Norse stuff, and she introduced me to the world of the Poetic Edda and all this stuff. And she's like, I think you would really like this. And that was my diving point. And it just took off from there. My shamanic practice is the majorities of it is Peruvian, and because it just everything about it's my soul. But it took off from there. Reading all the books, finding Source Channel, all that kind of stuff, just being into the practice, living the practice. I have everything down to Norse divination cards. It's the Norse stuff's tattooed on my arm. Like it's a way of life. So it was my sister who started me. She was like, here, just handing me the book. She's like, be free. And that's what it was. It was freedom.
That's good. All right, perfect. Good intro then. We'll go Nathaniel then next.
All right, so my name is Nathaniel Hoytmacher. I have a YouTube channel and a podcast that's called Forbidden Knowledge. I just started doing it earlier this year, going into over a decade worth of research, probably close to 14 years worth of stuff now. All of it having to do with what I would call natural law in some form or another. I do a bunch of research into various different spiritual disciplines and topics, and looking into various different ancient peoples and what they did and whatnot. I was actually blessed in a way by making it so that way I was raised in a semi-pagan household to begin with. So it made it much easier to understand these ancient practices, but also having a modern mentality and mindset by making it so that way I live in the time period that I am, as well as having it to where some of my family was atheist and agnostic for their particular worldviews and that kind of stuff. So that's my father's side was mainly that. My mother's side, one of them for my grandparents was Catholic. The other one is, but my mother, she was raised as a Catholic, but converted over to Hinduism before I was born, specifically a Vedic version of it and whatnot. And so I have been going to these events before I can even remember going to these events. I was literally a month old when I was taken to the first one and did stuff there with it. And I've gone through various different practices and whatnot that had to do with it all the way up. So that's where some of my background comes from on this particular point in front for it. As for how I got into Nordic paganism, I had studied so many different other traditions. I've studied Shintoism. I've studied, obviously, the Vedic because I grew up in it. I've studied some ancient Egyptian, some ancient Irish mythology and practices that were going on with it, Sumerian, etc., for what was going on, all right? But I hadn't really touched on the Nordic side, the Germanic people side, which obviously with my last name, as well as researching my family tree and that kind of stuff, I have a lot of that into me for it. How I got into this specifically was I was looking for a new topic to start researching and really deep diving and really getting to know on a much deeper level. But a roommate of mine had just moved into my place and whatnot as a transplant from California to New Hampshire, which is where I live now. California is my home state. We met in college. Anyway, he needed a place to stay for a while. One of the things that he got me was from some sort of little weird shop that he went to that was closing down and that kind of stuff. And it was this deck of cards that had the Elder Futhark in it. And from there, slowly but surely, it started me doing all this different research into various different things on the Nordic stuff with it, which of course how I came across Thor's channel. And on YouTube and all the other stuff with it. And since that time period, which will be 2 years, in December of this year that I've started this particular deep dive and whatnot, I've read over 200 books on the topic. I have watched around 300 to 400 videos on it that are at least half an hour long. I've done lots of shorter ones that are that particular way. And I've also probably read around 200 scholarly articles on the topic and whatnot. So that's just how I do stuff whenever I get into something with it. And when I say I deep dive it, I mean that I really deep dive what I'm getting into in order to fully understand it and put myself into the mentality of it. I've probably read thousands of books over the last 14 years, all having to do with my particular path and whatnot, and my particular research. That's just the way that I function and whatnot. You can call me autistic if you want in that regard, but it's true. So
Sounds good. Perfect. Yeah, look, questions on that one for sure, but we can leave that for later. So go next one. Yoda's the red one.
Well, thank you for having me be a part of this. I'm really excited to be here. I'm definitely surrounded by some of the most, what I've come to find, some of the most accessible and scholarly minds involved in paganism, and specifically Norse paganism. I've done a lot of research, and I think maybe I'll be sort of someone that people who are new to the topic or new to paganism can probably connect with and share a similar perspective, because I've only really been a practicing Norse pagan for about 2 years. And it started out focused more into the Norse pagan concept. But then as you go further and deeper into this, you realize there's the Indo-European aspect and the connectedness and the seed of all these tribes where they came from, and you just get to go down this beautiful, amazing rabbit hole of language, geography, and how those things shape the modern world and beliefs that we experience today. And you find out that there's so much more to our history than what we're being taught in mainstream media. So for me, I grew up in a Christian household. I think a lot of people did, but never really felt the connection there, because a lot of times, it wasn't a very animistic or nature centric type of religion. It's organized. It's meant to compel people into certain behaviors, I believe. But as a young child, I mean, I experienced so many things that took me outside the realm of just the physical, that I always knew that there was something different. And, I even, as we were beginning to do this whole podcast, I started reminiscing on these things and remembered a few things that once when I was very young, had a intense hallucination about an individual in the woods that like was like a tree man type of thing, the interesting imagination of children that I would see often when I go play in the woods. And then eventually I just kept going deeper and deeper into the woods, and I ended up finding, one of my lost dogs. I found the, remains of one of my lost dogs. And you go through life and you experience these little tiny things that can't really be explained, and you don't even know if they're real. And you start looking for something. And when I came to the realization that paganism isn't like religion, it isn't like these organized, I don't know, these systems of structure to organize people and their thoughts, you start realizing that there's this, as you said, Crow, there's a freedom in this sort of thing. And that's what kept me attached to it. And it's because of people like Tor, who made his channel and made this accessible, relatable information, that I was able to not pass it up. I was able to access it and realize how it can be brought into my life. So for myself, I consider myself just an animist in general. I would consider myself more of a sun worshiper at this point. But, being able to grow and find these communities, especially ones that surround, just show me like how alone you aren't, and how this is really a growing phenomenon and a returning phenomenon. And it's probably a direct response to what we're experiencing these days. So that's where I'm at. I'm here, just so grateful that I get to learn from all of you guys and be able to just have a front row seat to it all.
Perfect. Yeah, you saying there, I got like 2 more great questions I would ask a bit later on from what you spoke about. But yeah, we can move on then to Athena.
Hi, I'm Athena. And just appreciate being here. I'm not as poetic as you all, but I guess I've been pagan consciously for about 12 years, and just kind of seeking the right thing. I know for myself, and I've always been drawn to. Well, I should say recently, I've kind of just been doing my family tree, and I've kind of discovered some things that made sense from when I was younger that my grandmother would do when we were little, like leave out some oatmeal with honey for I'm assuming because I was so young, but for the land spirits, and so I just kind of delved more into that and found Thor's channel, which I'm very excited about. And I was just I'm stuttering. I'm not good at this, you guys. I hope you can cut that out. But really, I was looking online. You wouldn't believe how much crap is out there about heathenry or asatru. And I just discovered YouTube recently, you might laugh, within the last year about how awesome it is. And nothing is by accident. So by divine inspiration, I saw a snippet of Thor's channel and I was like, oh my God, let's check out this dude. And it was absolutely wonderful. Like, it just seemed really real. It wasn't backed up by feelings and airy-fairy stuff. And it just spoke to me and it just seems really real. And so I started listening and binge watching all of his stuff. I just, again, I'm just super new baby heathen or whatever. I would even, yeah, that's just what it is.
That's
Sorry.
perfect. Perfect. Thank you. That's great. So,
Yeah, that's
and one of the newer ones, but again, like you and so many other people who may be watching around the country or the world, they've been doing these things. A lot of people have already been doing these pagan practices their whole lives. I mean, if you went on an Easter egg hunt as a kid, you've been doing a pagan practice your whole life like that. So it's you would resonate more with the general person who has maybe not looked so much into it as the rest of us. But yeah, very cool and interesting. You found it that way. We'll go to the last one then. To Dustin. See if the sound holds up.
Well, hello, everyone. I'm Dustin. I've basically been interested into the pagan path since I was a really young boy. My upbringing was not one of, say, religious. My parents felt it would be best to leave it up to myself to decide what I come to. As I became a teen and whatnot, obviously the first thing that most people are introduced to is the monotheistic majority religions. I'd seen a bit of it, and after a while, I was kind of just, where did all this come from? I did my own research, did my own history. If there was only a single path, then why is there so many single paths? So I started reading on each of them since I didn't feel connected to a single one. And I went the same as Nathaniel. I went full bore and I started educating myself to the best of my ability and going all the way back to basically late Paleolithic era, like before actual written records of the mentality of the people that were farming agricultural lives, hunter gatherers, and why would they feel the way that they felt to create basically the gods of today that we see majorly? How did they look to, say, nature, that sustained them personally, and then come to revere those things that we know of as the gods in the old ways in the old countries now? When I came across Thor's channel, it was probably about 5 years ago, maybe 4 years ago. I was actually stationed overseas with the military, and there was kind of a flyer going around about pagan service. And when I had showed up to the first one, I hate to say it, it was quite cringe. And I'm like, the differences aren't too much, when it comes to, say, the Indo-European culture, the Germanic cultures, the Viking culture, go into the other surrounding cultures, whether it's the native holistic ways, the other tribesmen and tribespeople from all around the globe. Thankfully, because of my in-depth studies of all these different early religions before, started making a lot of sense. I started educating myself more, given as much of the back history that I knew, and then the new history was granted while I was overseas, and just delving into all the YouTube and readings and searchings and putting together a lot of the parts that started to really make sense for me. And it brought me to the belief that I have now, which is that we're all one people, truthfully. Yes, we have different geological locations, but understanding our spiritualities is really easy when we start understanding who and what we are and where we're from.
Oh, awesome. Beautifully said. We can move on, but first, I wanted to, I think a lot of people would be interested in that. I wanted to ask, you said you were in the service in the Middle East and they had a pagan service. To tell us about that. What was that like? Who organized it? What kind of people was it? And yeah, how was that? How was that allowed in a military setting? So that's super cool.
Right. Well, the military was starting to become a bit more open to different secular paths. Like, we get people from all over the world, people that have joined the U.S. forces that want to practice what they, come from at home. There's many people, whether it's Hasidic Jew or whether it's Sikh, Muslim, these people have different beliefs, different structures than what the military's typical background was. So they started being much more inclusive to the beliefs, the thoughts of people, and allowing different, I guess, regulation bends. So there's a lot of people that would see, say, a Sikh soldier. Well, he might have a turban and a beard, and everybody immediately wants to talk to this guy. Sometimes it's a little bit overbearing for them. So they started being little bit more inclusive, opening things up to where people of holistic paths can actually be granted these leniencies. And you give a mouse a cookie, they're going to want a glass of milk. It's same thing goes for this service. You see someone like myself or yourself with a beard but no turban, it's like, oh man, that's whatever. So they want to talk to you, and then it really became kind of the beard in uniform sort of cool thing. And the good thing about that, though, is that's what it looks like on the surface. Once you really start understanding the path, the beliefs, the holistic nature of these things, you really want to get more knowledge, and you start showing up at these things more often. Whilst the small community there is and the bad information that's plentiful, it becomes sometimes hard to get the correct information. Thankfully, I reached out to yourself while I was actually overseas. I remember a phone call with you and a few of the people in my class. So the unit that was rotating out was heading up this heathen Hofstad. I don't know what you'd call it. It was just a small area where they did their little gatherings. And then given my knowledge of it being a much more earth-based spirituality, I was like, it's great to have this as like a communal meeting place, but let's take this outside. Let's experience, the night sky, the yearly walks, the actual giving back, the accepting of nature, rather than the same as many others is where you cage yourself in a small room and hope that a God can see through that. It's not necessarily the same with us. They've seen that of me and the way I practice, and the person that was leading that asked me if I'd like to actually take over. Immediately, same as this, it's a little bit off-putting at first, but put your whole heart into it, do your study, do your research, and get some good guidance, and you can actually take that pretty far. So thankful and happy to have had that opportunity.
Yeah, awesome. That's super cool to see. We can maybe do a whole episode on that. I didn't even know it was such a big thing like that. Spirituality in the armed forces, because I think not just the U.S. but I think some European countries as well. Even like Australia and New Zealand, they have something similar. Like they've opened it up to stuff like that. So super cool. Yeah, we can go. We can move on then. That's a great intro from everybody. What is maybe one of the first things you'd like to speak about and have a roundtable like discussion on, Dustin?
I don't have my notes with me, but to kind of spitball off the top of the head, some of the things that I wanted to get into speaking about, obviously, where we're from and all of that's been addressed, but kind of more along the lines of what makes it unique in our practice. That's an easy one. I know for myself, something that's probably unique for myself and my practice is, like I said, is being outdoors rather than being confined to a small area. One of the questions that I had when I was overseas was, what about altars? Because in monotheistic religion and such, there's typically an altar or a podium where someone would speak from and such. And then in my understanding, in my belief, in my path, in my faith, altars are not necessarily an indoor thing, but they could either be a standing structure that's there prior to you, or something that we create that can bring the energies there towards it.
Yeah, that's a super important question. I like how you said that. It's I could start first. It's so important because it's going to be individually. In ancient times, it would have maybe been more communally, but everybody is going to be practicing in their own way. If you were agricultural people in ancient times. You would have been worshipping agricultural gods. You would have been giving offerings to Freyr and things like that. You would have done specific practices at certain times of year to benefit your people. If you were the warrior class of society, they would be practicing their spirituality quite a different way. And there's a bunch of different things like that. So we don't really have a unified religion. There's no like Norse religion unifying us that is going to tell us, like Christianity, okay, show up here on Sunday, you say the prayer this way, you do this thing at this time of year, this thing at that time of year. That just doesn't exist. Everyone needs to figure out what it is that's going to call to them and what's going to be meaningful to them and to benefit your life. This is what a lot of people need to understand. We're not just worshiping because we think the gods are sexy and we want to treat them like sugar daddy and they want them to do nice things for us. We are going to do our spiritual practices in a way that is going to bring benefit to our lives or the communities around us. So yeah, that's certain things for me. I'm pretty well educated on everything in the Norse kind of realm of spiritual stuff. But there are some people who might get into runes. I don't get into runes at all, really, even though I know quite a bit about it. For me, it's about spiritual experiences. It's about astral traveling, and it's about bringing in the war spirit and that focused meditation. That's the basic outline of my practice, and I can go into a lot of things I do for all of that. But that's the basic outline to my personal stuff. So we can move on. Keep going around then to Christina.
Sure. I will definitely piggyback off you there, Thor. I've learned a lot from you, actually, as far as a lot of the Norse stuff goes. Like I said, your channel's been an anchor. My uniqueness, I guess you can say, in my practice is that liminality in between this world and another. I practice things like, I have gone to a graveyard at night and practice Utiseta and stuff like that. Like, I've done those things, but my main goal is to commune with spirits between this world and the others. It's to commune with the spirits of this world. When it sounds all corny and new age, but it's, the plants and the trees and the rocks and all that other kind of stuff, because there is ancient knowledge and wisdom that resides in them. It's the connection to animals and, like I said, plants and that uniqueness. But my practice, like I said, is mainly those trance states in between. Always, I will always find the shadow and the light, the masculine and the feminine. Everything has to reside in bringing in both. But it could seem darker. Some parts of my practice may seem I work with blood, I work with bones, I work with dirt. I literally was just teaching my students to run around with a jar of dirt the other day. Like, because you got to ground and reconnect, and you have no idea the wisdom entails that's residing in the rocks of that jar of dirt. If you just take that moment to breathe and listen. Breathing is also a really big part of my practice. Drumming, music. That's all I can say. Music, noise, drumming, sounds, just rhythm, heartbeat, breath. It's just, I can't put it into words, but I guess that is the best way. It's a remembering that we all have to tune into, is what I try to teach people. Remember what it is that you're connected to, because it's in your blood. You know it, whether you realize it or not. That's my goal. I guess you can say that's a unique part of my practice.
Perfect. Sounds good. So you and Nathaniel, you've it's not just for personal experience and beliefs. Probably for 99% of the people watching this, it's just what do we want to believe? Let's explore some of these old beliefs and these old traditions and see what we believe. See if we can find some meaning in that. But you guys have done it professionally, it seems, almost, to the amount of research you've done. So Nathaniel, what is it about the personal experience and personal beliefs that your research has led to? What's the reason for that?
So, have you ever noticed when there's something that's important to you, there's something you really, really want to focus on, that your body becomes still, your mind becomes still. Sometimes you even stop breathing for a little bit and really focus on that and whatnot. That right there is how I know whether I found something that's important or not. It's that inner stillness that's within me, the space that's between the masculine and the feminine, the part that makes us that way. The entire being shuts the hell up for a second and lets it sit inside of you. That makes it go, there's something here with it. Because whatever that is, you've become an empty vessel for that in order to allow it to come into you and really seep into what's going on with that. And for me, my research is that it's a spiritual purification of the removal of all the noise, all of the nonsense, all the stuff that I think and isn't true and whatnot. It's a not this, not this, not this, not this, not this over and over again, or I was wrong, I was wrong, I was wrong, I was wrong over and over again until you get to what's there with it. I want to use a metaphor here that, I think helps with this type of idea. It's a story, but it'll make sense to where I'm going with it afterwards, I promise. Michelangelo was staring at this marble slab that he had with him, and he'd come in every day for weeks, months on end. And he had attendants with him that were hired to help him out and whatnot. And one of them eventually asks the maestro, "What's he doing?" He says, "I'm working." The guy, "What's he doing? You're just staring at a slab all day long. What are you doing, maestro?" And he's like, "I'm envisioning in my mind everything that I want removed that's not there. And I don't pick up the chisel and the hammer until I have that." And of course, that statue became what we know today as David, one of the most recognized statues in the entire world and whatnot. It's the same process that goes on here. It's not so much I need to add this to my life, I need to do this to my life, I need to. It's a removal of everything that's not natural. It's a removal of a programming that we've all had, that we've all been put in by our culture, by the people around us, by our parents, by society at large, whatever, and that kind of thing. And it's more about stopping doing things that aren't helping us and moving towards things that actually do help us. That is what it is on that part with it. To dovetail off of what you've said, Thor, and whatnot too, and make it so that way that's the case with it, as well as Dustin, what he was bringing up with it as well. Yeah, you can make a stone altar, you can do all these other things with it, but ultimately none of that matters in any way, shape, or form. All of those are external manifestations of what's already inside of us. It's an above as below type principle, within without type principle for what's going on there. It's the same thing with what Christina was saying with the divine masculine and the divine feminine. We need to make it so that way both of our bicameral brain parts that are there, the right and the left side, which one is mostly feminine in the way it thinks and one is mostly masculine in the way that it thinks, is in alignment and brought in together. When you have imbalances on either one of them, that's when you stop living naturally. That's when it makes it so that way everything starts falling apart, both on a collective level and on an individual level.
Oh, that's a great analogy. I like that. It's and we're not. It's like you said. We're trying to filter out the things that don't make sense to us or things that we don't want to believe in. Like we're not reading some book and saying, okay, we're going to believe everything in here. We're testing everything out and say, that thing. Okay, maybe ancient people believed in it, but that's not going to do anything for me. So a really cool analogy. I never thought of it that way.
For me personally, if you look at it from like different layers and whatnot, there's the exoteric and then there's esoteric. The exoteric is you're taught to believe this. This is what it is, and whatnot. And this is where most people fall into this, the outer circle of stuff. But there's another inner circle, and there's even one beyond that, which is just truth, of course. But people can debate what that is all they want. So I'm just going to stick with the esoteric and whatnot. That smaller circle of stuff that's there, which is the meanings behind the stories, the meanings behind the stuff with it and whatnot, and realizing the deeper truths that are all there. That's what I'm interested in. That's what I care about, because all of it is just symbolic on the ultimate level for everything that's going on with it. None of it is making it so that way you do any of that. The sacrifices, the bloats, the doing all the other things that are going on with it, heck, even chanting, meditation, all these other things, they are all just pathways in order to have direct gnosis of what is going on and for you to have it on a personal level. Nothing else matters in any way, shape, or form. It's like the difference between eating a sandwich and reading the description of a sandwich. Until you've eaten the sandwich, you don't know what it is. I can tell you about it all day long. I can read it in books all day long. I can do it all that. None of that means anything until you have that experience, though. That right there, that is what I seek out. That's the only thing that's important. The rest of it is all symbolic. The rest of it is just there to get you in the right state of mind, the right way to do things. The gods are symbolic and whatnot. Yes, some of them literally exist in terms of forces and whatnot out there in nature and all that, but even they represent certain parts of ourselves and whatnot. That's basically what it boils down to for me.
Perfect. Great said. That sounds good. New poetic ways of thinking about it, ways that I can articulate. So that's one thing you're great at. Right, Ryan. Ryan, your personal kind of beliefs and practices and how they were formed.
Yeah, so obviously I was a pleb and got brought into it through the Hollywood representations of ancient Scandinavian history. But then there's these little things that you notice when, I worked in film for a little while, and then you notice little things in it that you realize, like, oh, that was a researched detail that made it into the film. So when you watch something like The Norsemen and you see the chieftain's partner that chose to go with him into the afterlife, reaching her head over the doorway and reciting these poems, you look at it and you realize, like, man, this really, like, how did this make it in there? And you start researching it and you realize, like, oh, this is actually something that was really incredibly prevalent in the time period. And it's just because of those little things that, like, I guess my perception or my desire to learn, noticed, led me down this path of just the endless rabbit hole that's just veiled. You were never going to know everything about it. I think that's part of the reason it becomes so fascinating, is because it's almost like Nathaniel was saying, it's like as above, so below. It seems like the things that we don't know about in the past become our responsibility, manifest and by practicing. So it's just like, if we practice with what we know, it's likely that we're going to have similar results, right? So we can almost fill in the blanks with our current experience to be almost similar to what we have lost in the past. And that's what my whole idea is here and what I've been wanting to do. I think simplicity is probably the most important thing. A lot of people like to imagine that all the time in early pagan tribal cultures, individuals were constantly getting down on their knees and praying to Wodan and all this sort of stuff. But they were people living lives just like we are now. They weren't choosing to use primitive technology. They were actually taking and developing technology that made their lives easier, and I think made sense at the time, because it was a very difficult time to exist. You look at it now, we have all these conveniences. I think it's important in my life to be looking backwards and say, like, okay, well, what does this convenience do to me, and how does it remove me from what I'm supposed to be? And that's my journey right now, is understanding, like, how the past can reignite or reawaken the DNA that's dormant within me. My father just passed recently. I was able to give him one of the most symbolic pagan ceremonies that I think I could have done in a public space. And even when I was doing that, I realized, like, this feels right. This feels so much more incredibly right than having all these people assemble and we sing these hymns with this dull tone. It was much more alive feeling. His presence was there. That was one of the other things that just cemented me in moments of doubt, where I was like, what am I even thinking or doing? It's the experience that brings me into it, something I think Nathaniel was mentioning. But as a simplistic person, I get a lot of my research into the Bronze Age of Scandinavia, where sun worship was incredibly prevalent. And I think that makes the most sense, because if we were to look at a literal god in these days, I would say that the sun would have to be the most empirical form of godliness that we can experience, because essentially all life does manifest from that initial source. And that's what I kind of revolve my perception around. I think that all the forces sort of come from that. And then we do get those conceptions of gods manifesting in other elemental forces through that as well. But for me, it's all about creating like a revivalist, trying to be a revivalist with it. Like I want to be an individual who reawakens the DNA, has a family, and then allows those ancient practices to then continue on. And so I channel that by doing things that my ancestors may have done. My wife and I, she manages an organic farm. So we grow almost all of our own vegetables. We harvest and ethically butcher all of our own chickens. I hunt. I make sure that whenever I need to, I'm building a shed right now, something that deeply awakens a thought process I think a lot of ancestors might have had to go through. Early mathematics and these types of things. I may be rambling a bit here, but I guess really what I'm trying to say is that I want to keep it simple, and I want to be the start of reawakening what's been lost and giving that to my family, giving that to the generations, and then those descendants going out into the world and spreading, what it feels like and how liberating it can be to see the world and experience the world, not necessarily through a screen. You know what I mean?
And what a beautiful time period we live in. Just like you said, we have now the access to do these things like no one else before in maybe 3,000 years since the Bronze Age, right? Because now we have, the whole world has this, as even though we've maybe strayed so far from the natural ways and from nature and from these old religions and things like that, there's a lot of things we don't understand, but at the same time there's so many opportunities to reawaken that, like they couldn't have done 100 years ago, 400 years ago, because they would have to hunt down these books and libraries and sort through thousands and thousands of pages, and then it was what they would maybe want to be doing was probably illegal at the time anyway and not allowed. So what a great time period we live in where we can really revive all those old things. So yes, really, really good point what you said there. All right then, Athena, personally, your personal beliefs and how they were formed.
Well, I'm still working on that. Honestly, I mean, I'm eclectic and I like to know a little bit about everything. I am one of the things that I do is I make it a point every week or every weekend to go to the North Cascades because I just feel like that area speaks to me, and just being out there in nature and with the forest. And I can spend an hour, 2 hours out there just hanging out, and it just, I feel a lot of peace and serenity out there. I mean, that's one thing that I make a point to do. The other things, I mean, I just try to incorporate everything as a way of life. So just living with intention. So even if I'm vacuuming my house, I just want to be mindful of the intention of what's going behind it. If that makes any sense, I don't really know. But yeah, I mean, I still have I got some books that I'm reading, and I'm still trying to make sense of everything. I don't really know. That's just kind of where I'm at right now. I want to
Yeah,
be where
perfect.
all of you are. All of you guys have what you've said. It just really, like, I can see it. It speaks to me, and I think it's very beautiful. It just, for me, it just goes to show like that this is the right way, like for me, and it speaks to my core. Yeah, that's where I'm at.
When you embark on these things, since you're the newest one of us, this will be most fresh in your memory out of all of us. But what is it you're looking for? Is it specific things? Are you looking for general guidance? Are you looking for ways to improve your life? Like, what is it specifically that
It's a
when you
sense of
started to come in that you were looking for?
Yeah, it's a sense of purpose. I mean, I think we all have to have some kind of purpose. Otherwise, why are we even here? I mean, and that purpose doesn't have to be some big major thing in life. It can just be something as smiling at somebody and it changes their whole day. I mean, it could be something simple as that. For me, though, I just feel like I'm here for some kind of purpose, and I know that there's some kind of, I don't know how to say it. I know there's some kind of design behind all of this. I don't know. Does that make sense? Did I
Yeah, I
answer your
think we're all
question?
looking for the same thing too. This is more time, and that is not. I can't say that I've solved that question, but it's maybe get more direction. Though that's there. Now I'm not going to be able to sleep at night. I was thinking about that again. I haven't thought about that in years. All right, then, Dustin, your personal beliefs and how did they formed, and how did you?
So personal beliefs definitely just kind of bouncing off of what each of us have already hit on already. Like Nathaniel was talking about, stripping down that which is just unnecessary, getting down to the core, remembering through our DNA what life was like, and just trying to regain that, to get back in touch with our ancestral ways by stripping away that which is just bombarding us on our everyday lives. There's just so much going on with our everyday lives these days that it's really easy to lose sight of that which connects us all. There's that what Athena was just speaking about when it comes to sort of a grand design such. Like I wouldn't go so far as that, but maybe it's that connectedness within us all. Maybe it's just we all share so much, regardless of where we're from, regardless of what path we'll say. Like, we share this world, we share this planet, we share these feelings, we share those spiritualities in one way or another, going across the time from who knows how far back until today. We still search for these things. So I'm sorry, I got quite a bit away from the original question. What was?
Yeah, that's good, but yeah, your own personal beliefs and how they
Right.
formed.
So yeah, and then I
That's
guess
kind of answered it.
yeah, well, I guess how I would come to form these is through all of the extensive reading and research, and then truthful practicing. Like I can't say that there's one path that I didn't delve into, that I didn't at least give my best to understand it from their perspective. And that's what landed me here. The way that we all seem to practice at this now is holistic. It's truth. It's felt by all. You don't need a certain book, a certain day, a certain house to do this in. Like, we all understand that. We all feel that deep within. You can remove someone from any area, but you can't remove certain things from what's in.
That's great. That was a good question. That took us all the way. That's if we can go like probably just 2 more questions around table, and that would bring us to over an hour. But yeah, the only other thing I wanted to touch on was daily spiritual practices versus ones that you would reserve for special occasions. But yeah, is there anything else, Dustin? You had your. Is there anything else you can remember from your notes that you wanted to cover?
As far as daily versus the rare occasions, going off of, say, the solar cycle and whatnot, obviously there's the sorry, 1 second. The winter solstice, the summer solstice, the equinoxes between them. Like, that's pretty much what I would go off of when I say my major holidays and whatnot. If you wanted to get a little bit more in depth, there would be the midsummer and there would be the midwinter, which is obviously, used by most of us as well. What I try to do is working with the seasons, working with the moon cycle. Again, back to when I was overseas, there was a separate group that was trying their best to do similar spirituality practices and whatnot. And they got into the idea of sacrifice. And one of the things that I hold to my core beliefs that I wanted to definitely give across to anyone else who's listening or who was there that day is a sacrifice. You can't harm an animal and think that that's a sacrifice. If you raised a calf and then you have to now give that calf to a community, that's a whole separate story. Like, a sacrifice must be a sacrifice made by ourselves. Well, in today's age, it's a little bit harder to do that sort of stuff. And I don't have much of a farming area because I live in the city. So my sacrifices would be something more that is grown, built, given, even a song, or if you're a baker, like something that you can give back, something that you put your heart and soul and sacrifice into, and then offer that back up.
Yeah, that's great. Sacrifice. That's a big one. That's what the people will, if they're part of the Norse religion or many pagan religions, they'll understand that concept of sacrifice, and that is basically what my special occasions revolve around too. Yeah, we can go around the table then, if everyone's ready for that question.
Well, time is a huge sacrifice. That's literally your life.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, exactly. Time, yeah. That's lots of things can be sacrificed. For me, when I think about the sacrifices, it is specifically to awaken whatever spirits or energy that is. For me, that's how I look at it. Everybody else can do different. What I found most beneficial for me, the sacrifices, especially the sacrifices to wake up the spirit. It's to wake up the burial mound you're giving the blood to. It's to wake up the Hödigid, the altar that you're sprinkling on the blood. And you have to do this at the specific times of year. Like as in the Norse beliefs, there are three: the start of winter, middle of winter, that's Yule, and then the start of summer. And then you can add some others here and there as well, but they revolve around the moons. So I make sure to, especially the one that I like most is the Sigerblut in the summer, which we did. Ryan was here for that. We did that on the exact right day here in Denver. That was a great one. That was to bring on victory. So that's my favorite one. I also like Veternatter. That's sacrifice typically to the ancestors. So I will go out and maybe leave some offerings on some ancestors' graves if I'm in Norway. If I'm in the U.S., I'm far away from my ancestors, but that's one. I try to do certain things revolving around that. I also try to give things to trees. Trees are very, very important, very powerful. We can get a lot of energy and benefits from trees. So I leave offerings out to trees, honey, oats, things like that, things that they like according to the tradition. Butter is also very good. So those are the things I do a little more regularly. But speaking about daily practices, it's meditation, like really, really, really trying to get good at it. It's a skill. It's not something you just close your eyes and then you're meditating. There is levels to this. There is like meditation, like closing your eyes and thinking about something, turning your thoughts off. And then there's meditation where you forget you even existed ever as a human soul and you're out in some completely different realm. That's similar to like a really like heavy psychedelic substances. And I've never really taken that. I'm not a fan of psychedelic substances either. You can get to these states of mind through meditation as well. It just takes a whole lot of work and effort. And even I've been doing it for years, I struggle with it. But that's what I do on the daily basis. That and connecting to the earth, try and walk barefoot in the earth as much as I can. So those are my daily and more rare occasion spiritual practices. That we can move on then to Christina. I know she's probably got a lot more.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff rolling around in this Rolodex of brain of mine. So I'm getting so pumped up as all of you were talking to. I'm like, yeah, that's awesome. And that point's awesome. So forgive all the flailing and all the stuff that you're going to see in my videos here. Those of you watching, I'm very easily excitable, especially when it comes to these spiritual things. I like live, eat, breathe. I only exist because of these spiritual things. And it took a while to understand that. You separate the mind, body, and the soul, the parts of us, and you're only really living when the soul is able to be free and spiritual. As far as daily practices go, again, I'm a mom of two, and my husband works a lot. So oftentimes it's madness. So I try to remember my daily practices as much as possible. So those of you out there who are having trouble finding the time and stuff like that to try and squeeze something in, I'm your gal. I think that's why too my Rolodex of brain will work, because somebody will come to me and be like, how do I do this? How do I fit it in with my day? And be like, you can throw this like little bit of meditation in, like as soon as you park at your job, and you can do like I'll just throw it out there. But my daily practices are very, again, nature-based as much as I can be outside. I'm very fortunate we have a nice piece of land. I have two very big, old and wise poplar trees, also an entire thing of woods in the back, and three really old red cedars, which are very, very ancient and highly regarded in a lot of native practices and stuff like that. So I make sure I spend a lot of time with them. I'll even make my daily practices something that I can just do, just have a few minutes to sit in the morning before my kids get up for school or whatever. Well, now we're in the summer, but before they get up and I have like a moment of quiet, I'll just get my coffee and then just like as I'm stirring, like I'll stir counterclockwise, like to bring in life and stuff like that, and be like, all right, just need a few minutes peace here, just stir in an intention or something of that sort. It can be something as simple as that. You can take 5 minutes to your day to then stir that intention into that coffee. And then when you ingest it, you're bringing it internally into your body. So it's touching on the mind, the body, and the soul. It's the whole thing. You're really making it part of you. As far as more elaborate practices, I do try to at least do all of the solstices. I will give offerings and such like that. In the Peruvian shamanism, we practice a thing called the despacho ceremony, which is an offering, like it is a purposeful offering to Mother Earth. And you basically wrap up in paper. It's made up of tons of different food items. And the more items that you either grew yourself or something of that sort, you have to put effort into it. Again, speaking on that topic of sacrifice, you need to have put your energy into an effort. Like if you just went and bought seeds from the store, no. But if you had a plant and you harvested the seeds from it and you put that into your offering as much as you possibly can. Mother Earth likes things sweet. So as Thor was speaking before, things like mead and honey and oats and stuff like that. That is a big thing if you can put sweet stuff in there. And what you do with the despacho ceremony is it's supposed to be with the community if you can, because it's actually a communal offering to where everybody can take part, add their own pieces that like who raised cattle or who put in grains or something of that sort. And you give this offering to Mother Earth. And you either burn it because it has to transition from one form to another. So there's always that fire is the number one kind of thing to make an easy transformation, or you bury it. And if you bury this offering after you wrap it all up with all the communal stuff that's added to it, and animals actually come and dig it up and eat it, that's how you know that the communal prayers have been heard. So I'll save things like that for the more solstices. I try to do the moon cycles. I'm into the witchy stuff of astrology and all those kinds of things, but it has a lot of gravity to it when you dig into it. Not, the little excuse of, oh, I'm a biatch because I'm a Scorpio. No, stop. Okay. But you can live life by it, same as you live by other cycles in nature, by seasons and all that stuff. Everything is a cycle. That's what I can say my practice looks at is cycles, where things are repeating over and over again, how each one can transition from one season to another, one direction to the other. Like in shamanism, the 4 directions is extremely important. In the Lakota medicine that Peter Whitefeather is teaching me, the 4 directions on the medicine wheel actually represent 4 different mindsets, an emotional path, a spiritual path, and you do different things during those different times and different seasons. You don't take action until other parts. So it's a lot of observance. It's a lot of cycles. And, one day I might spontaneously feel like I want to do something magical because the energy is telling me that I need to do something. So I'll just grab the kids and, I work a lot with runes, and we actually wrapped up some runes out of straw and hung them from my poplar trees as a fun offering for them to decorate them. And I swear to you, after we did that, their leaves, they were like standing up. They were so happy. Like 2 days later, it's those things. It's those little things. So yeah, you can do these big elaborate things. I actually get a lot of my practice in, I guess you can say, when I'm treating others. I will often have clients that I do everything from Reiki to shamanic medicine healing and stuff to chumpy stones, which you don't see very often. That's who I learned chumpy from Justo Apaza on this little cell phone that they have up in Cusco, Peru, that on Zoom with it failing 5 million times, but we got all the training in. I get that energy transfer and I feel like I'm actually practicing my path when I'm treating somebody else. Chumpies are more rare and stuff like that, but I do have clients that come regularly for shamanic balancing, illumination, extractions, all that kind of stuff, underworld journeying to rediscover their purpose. That's when I truly feel like I'm practicing. I'm meant to do these things for others, not for myself. And that took many years to understand. I'm 37 now, and I know I still have a lifetime ahead of me to learn more. So I can't wait to see where it keeps going. So I hope that answered your question. I kind of went off on a tangent.
Perfect. That's well. You have a lot more to say about that. You do these things professionally, so that's that's it. You definitely have more daily dealings with that stuff than the rest of us. One thing I also like you covered. I'd like the rest of you to speak about that too. When we get around to the challenges that we have in regular daily life in 2024. Like for me, of course, I know I would change my life upside down if I could to really, really be into the spiritual practices that I want to be doing. I would be going to bed with the sun, waking up with the sun, except I have to work 20 hours a day. I would be away from this shitty computer screen and not even look at it, but that's just not the world we live in. So that poses a lot of challenges to our spiritual path as well. So, yeah, we can go on there. Nathaniel, what are your daily practices like? Yeah, less regular practices, and what kinds of challenges do you have to overcome living in the modern day to get what you need done?
I'm going to start with the challenge part mainly for two reasons. One, it kind of connects to everything else that's going on anyway that I'm going to be talking about. And two, so I don't forget about it. Most of the challenges that I personally see with other people, and especially when it comes to myself, so I'll definitely say this for that with it, is not living in the present moment. It's allowing my past to dictate my present moment or to dictate my future, and getting too caught up on stuff that's already happened for things with it and the story we tell. Most people are either regretting things that they've done or wishing that things they had done differently or whatever on one part or another or that kind of stuff, or they're worrying or have fear about the future and all the other things that are going on with it. So, Thor, as an example, you brought up the fact that you would prefer getting up with the sun, going to bed with the sun and that kind of stuff with it, and just being more in the natural cycle of things with it. I find that while these things, like I have some of the stuff that not that particular one, but I have certain things I would prefer doing and I would prefer having done with it and whatnot, that if I focus on the separation between, say, the spiritual and the mundane, instead of realizing that they're the same thing and that there's no difference between them and whatnot, by focusing and living in the present moment, that brings that back to the forefront and whatnot. Too many people fall into this trap and whatnot. It's what I was talking about earlier with the bicameral brain that we have with it, where too many people fall into one camp, say atheists and agnostics and whatnot, who are, it's only the material, it's only here, or following into the other side of things, which is wanting to float off into different areas of reality and whatnot and escape this reality. What we need to have is kind of like a boots on the ground spirituality, if you will, and make it so that way that's the case for it. And I try to make that a part of my daily practice, a part of my understanding of things with this, which is why my two main practices, meditation / utisetta, that I do on a daily basis. That's to help with the one side with it. And then the other side is to make it the studying and making it so that way I really understand what's going on with that. And as I spoke about before, when I find something that makes it so that way it literally pulls my breath out of me and makes me very still and all that other stuff with it, and I have a direct personal gnosis with everything from the research or from the meditation or from both, and that kind of thing with it, that bridges that gap, so to speak, and puts me back here and whatnot. We can never escape the present moment anyway. It's the only thing that ever existed. The past is gone. It'll never happen again, and we can't ever go back to it. And the future is just a concept in our head because it's always in the future. The only thing that exists is now. And so the more that we focus on that, is the more that we can make it so we overcome the challenges that are set before us and whatnot. And we don't have to be someone that's a victim to our past and having it to the story that we've told ourselves, make it what's going to continue happening and whatnot. That's how I overcome these things. That's how my daily spiritual practices are set up for me and whatnot, in a very boiled down sense, so to speak. Any questions on that part before I move on to the...
No questions.
Okay.
The more,
So on the more rare occasion ones with it, I have a site that's near me and whatnot in New Hampshire. It's called Mystery Hill. Sometimes it's referred to as America's Stonehenge and what. There, it is quite obvious to anybody who's looking at it from a objective standpoint, as well as someone who knows how to look and think more on pagan terms with it. Unfortunately, a lot of the site has been destroyed and desecrated, but there are still aspects of it that are still there with it, to where there's a lunar calendar and a solar calendar mixed in together. I don't know exactly what was happening at this site, but there was something there that was much deeper with it. You have Phoenician script, you have Ogham script that's there for what's going on. You have petroglyphs that are there for what's happening. You have a serpent mound type thing that's going on with it, along with this calendar that I'm talking about, etc. So I go there sometimes with it on special days, and making it so that way I can partake in the energies that are there with that. And it's, interestingly enough, is that it's very clear to someone like me, it's based upon the same ancient principles that people use for other ancient sites, like, say, Stonehenge, or for some of the burial mounds that are done with it and whatnot, or even like the pyramids and that kind of stuff. When the pyramids were all built at that era, they're all using the exact same principles and science and whatnot, and it's not something that's talked about in textbooks specifically. This site is what I'm talking about, because it destroys the narrative that we didn't know about this side of the world for a long time and whatnot. That's kind of where I go to personally with that, now that I'm here. Other times before I moved here, I would go to special events that had to do with what my, Hinduism and that kind of stuff with it. For my mom's side, I did fire ceremonies for that were doing offerings in that particular regard for things with it. We would do, something that just happened this last weekend that my mom went to called Guru Purnima, and there's a bunch of events that go on there. Had I been back in California, that's what I would have done for these special type of things with it and whatnot. So there's a bunch of different things that go into that. And the nice thing is that since it's a Vedic tradition and it's directly linked to the Nordic stuff and the Indo-European, and what most of us, at least in this particular episode and whatnot that we're going to, or know about from this group.
That's great. Yeah, I never heard of that place before. I was looking at it while you were speaking. Very cool. Now that's more reason to visit the Northeast. Very cool.
There's lots of these sites that aren't talked about in the Northeast. So I'll just leave it at that for now.
Yeah, all over. I'm sure there's way more like that as well that are just not talked about. And even in Europe too, there are some very sacred places that nobody knows about, and you can just walk up to them, and just as important, maybe not like Stonehenge or the pyramids, but getting close to that level. There's places all over like that near people
that people don't know about are typically the ones that are the more important.
Yeah,
not always,
exactly.
Not always, but
yeah, exactly. All right then, Ryan, daily versus less regular spiritual practices, and how modern life can get in the way of that, and that's challenges.
Well, I used to live in Florida. I lived literally across the beach. And this was before I was ever into any type of, I guess I'll preface by saying that I always felt spiritual and spiritually connected to the earth in some capacity. But society did kind of beat it out of me. The people I surrounded myself with didn't allow space for that, didn't pursue those types of things. It was when I moved to Florida and I realized that I was just not really hanging out with the right type of people. They didn't do anything for me. I felt exhausted every time I did anything with these types of people. I got so into surfing. I became just an avid surfer. I surfed every single day, and it was wild. My health changed completely. I had more energy. I never got sick. I spent all my time on the beach. I ran in the sun each day, and I was in the salt water every day. I mean, and I think that was the point, because it healed. That was a literal example of my life. My girlfriend, she's been pagan longer than I have, and she was like, "Oh, there's a special thing about people who get their healing from the ocean," like, and it healed so much of the very poor habits that I had in my life. I think it was really there when I started realizing that the animistic approach is probably the best thing for continued development. But as far as a daily practice, I mean, I would say that at this point now, it's not so much the academic aspect of it, it's the practice itself. And I'm definitely an impulsive person. So when when I got some really awesome news, the first thing I thought was like, okay, this is time to make an offering to Woden, So I reach in my fridge and I just grab some meat, take it outside. I have some meat. I plunge it. I do anything that feels like the appropriate thing to do. Where I used to live in this one location, I had a mound of rocks on top of my dead cat. And, I just thought, this is where I should give an offering, right here on top of this, And for me, it's so much about the feeling of it, what feels right based off of what I've learned. You know how sometimes comedians will steal a joke because they heard it somewhere and they don't realize that they're taking the joke. I think a lot of the academic and literal information that I receive from your channel, other people's work, everyone in the Discord, that stuff gets put in here somewhere. There are things that click, and then it just becomes a reaction at a certain point. When I was doing my father's ceremony, I took that spear right there. That's my boar hunting spear. I placed that in like a horga, or I'm not exactly sure the term that you would use for it in a funeral ceremony, but I built that up and I placed that directly within it. And, I realized I went into the water and I grabbed like the largest flat stone I could find. And I placed that at the front, placed a few things I brought for offering there. And I urged everyone to bring them some offerings themselves. And surprisingly, all these non-pagans, and surprisingly, one of my dad's friends ended up being a Norse pagan himself, brought all these amazing offerings. And then even on that whole time, the resonant feeling of what I was doing came into play in the natural world. A baby deer showed up that morning on my way there. A giant black bear was in the way. And during this entire proceeding, I realized that there was like the largest black snake I've ever seen in my life, literally in the bush right behind me. There's only one bush out there next to this river, black snake. There it was. And it's moments like that I realized that it's like it's so much more of like a lived experience, like you can't be if you want, but you can't be some guy who's like, okay, on Sundays we give offering to Wodan, Thursday, we bang our hammers. Then you just start becoming an organized religion. So for me, it's like a daily practice is when it's your life. So when your life happens, you do something in response to it, to the forces that have made themselves. I mean, I believe we are a way for the forces to know themselves. That's why we have our consciousness. That's why we were gifted that. So for me, I think right now what it is that I am doing a little bit more academic work into the sagas and learning about the runes. Someone had mentioned the runes were similar to like an ohm symbol. And once I got that information, I'm like, oh, okay, cool. I'd crafted my own runes from birch not long ago, and I draw one. And I don't horoscope it. I try to make it like weekly, So I'll draw one that I've crafted and I'll keep it in my pocket. And then I'll be going throughout my day and I'll feel it. And then that's when I'll get the urge and I'll look up. I'll have a lunch break and I'll think maybe I'll do a little bit of research. And then I'll look at it and I think, is this happening right now? Or do I feel this? And that's when sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't, I give it time to work on me because these things are out there. They're going to get to me when they need to get to me. But, as far as trying to have a practice, my wife and I, she was more pagan than I was for the longest time. And she's part of the reason why I even opened up to this stuff. She was a keeper of bees at a very prestigious bee sanctuary. So we have like 26 hives now, and we have, we've made this space for a beautiful garden. And I think it's all just about like the practice of living in a context that your ancestors could relate to. Because as I said before, I wanted to be this, I want to act as a vessel. I'm the last one in my family line. I'm having children, and I want to be that vessel. So I have to exist as in a form daily and mentally to allow them to access me, and do something, not really control me or anything like that, but just to supply those little moments that happen in nature and happen in life. And then you give those offerings. Like I said, it happens and then you respond. So, I mean, for me, that's really what it is. That's how I respond. Just the little nuggets that I keep and I learn, they just, they happen.
That's great. So it's not even like it's not like you're paying attention all the time for oracles. You're not looking out for bird signs. You're not looking at for stuff like that. It's just if you feel it, you're gonna do it. Like you pay very close attention to how you feel, and then you react appropriately to what you think would be right for that situation.
I mean, yeah, no doubt that I do see bird signs happening all the time. And I think the biggest thing I try to do, because I'm a fanciful guy, so I think it's important for me to kind of be like, 2 crows. No, I have to temper myself a bit because I love to get swept up into the mystery of it all. But there are moments where, like, I was speaking about it with somebody recently who did a lot of First Nations education. He went into the tribes, went into the sweat lodges, and I was just really lucky to speak to this guy. But we were talking about it, and I said, how how I can just this is what I was saying, like how I can justify that there are these forces and these spirits. And earlier I mentioned how like I saw hallucinations as a child. When you're like just passing by a bush and you see, or like a rock face, and you see like a person's face within it. It's like, okay, man, that is our shared DNA with everything on this planet forming itself, the forces appearing and creating the perception that, like, yes, there's something there. There is you within that thing. Seek it. And as Nathaniel was talking about with locations of significance, when I moved to this town that I live in now, I've been here for about 2 years, I became fascinated after watching a video that you had, and you know this about me, Tor, fascinated with birch. We have so much birch here, but even less than that, we have the white birch, and it's all intentionally planted. There's none of it naturally exists here, but there's, I swear, within like 100 miles of me, I know where every white birch is in my town. And I just, every time I go by them, I feel a presence within that. I mean, they're so easily noticeable amongst everything else, but my places around here have to be where the birch are. And because there was so much intention in bringing them here. You see people doing a practice that, I don't know, could be perceived in a lot of different ways. But anything else, speaking back to like how we talked about meditation, I actually have an indoor sauna that I use birch and eucalyptus oil within. It's like a steam sauna. And I turn the lights out completely, very slim amount of light. I sit in there, max temperature, and the visuals start to happen. And the faces start to happen, and it becomes this moment where you do kind of exist outside yourself, but it's almost like you're not. I'm at a point where I'm still trying to keep myself in my body to maintain through the practice rather than just like letting it completely go away. But getting there, definitely getting there.
Yeah, that's a great tool to have. I just started going to the sauna now after like quite a while without them. That's powerful stuff. Christina's got some stories about that too. But we'll move on to Athena then. Daily pagan practices versus more occasional ones, and what challenges modern life has to completing those.
Well, one thing is I love all things divination, and I've been a card reader for at least 12 years as well, and I'm actually just learning the runes as well right now, so that's kind of fun and interesting to do. One of the things that I like to do on a regular basis is I do like to meditate, and I can't remember, one of you mentioned it, where you kind of like lose yourself, like you're there but you're not, you're like outside of yourself. And so, I do that. I like to do that before bed because I'm going, when I lay down, I kind of feel like I'm still in that state, and then I can just kind of dream or control my dreams, or, whatever I'm going to see while I'm dreaming. So that's some of the things. As far as like, holidays, I have a BTW background. I just kind of follow the astrological wheel of the year at the moment. So that's just kind of all the major holidays, the solstices and the equinoxes and things like that. But one thing I wanted to talk to, because I know you were wondering what the challenges are. I think the biggest challenge, at least for me, is finding community, whether that's in person and or online. I think they both have value in different ways. But I am somebody that can bond or get to know better where it's in person or one-on-one or smaller groups. And I have found that there's not really many communities, one that'll hold you accountable and also push you to grow. And for me, pushing you to grow is not being a yes person. Oh, you were right to do that, or you were right, they shouldn't have done that to you. Pushing someone to grow, in my opinion, is pushing them past their comfort zone. So like for me, I'm not a really good speaker, and I wasn't sure about being on this podcast, but I'm trying to push myself to grow out of that comfort zone, because I know when you push past that zone, many wonderful things can happen in your life. I just know it. And just if you keep pushing yourself, you're not going to be the same person you were even 2 months ago, or however long that is. So I find that that's a big challenge in finding community, online community. I've noticed there's, a bunch of Facebook groups or and things like that, but it's not really, I don't want to say it's not safe, but there's too much anonymity where people can just not think about what they're saying maybe, and they'll just give you some flippant remark, not thinking about what's going on. And also, I kind of feel like, too, those communities can be super huge. So it's hard to get that personal attention that maybe you would want in a smaller community. And I think that's one of the things that I value, that I find is a really, really hard challenge, I guess.
Yeah, so super important. I was there for like years. I always did things myself too, just because I didn't want to deal with all that bullshit online and all those people in those groups. And then I did my own rituals to myself too. I did all the brutes and everything like that. It's been years since I did a one with a community. This was at the Siegeblut, which Ryan was here for in Denver. How many were we? About 15, 20 people. And I'm not one for like theatrics. I'm not gonna say a prayer when I do a brute. I'm not gonna do any of these things. But we had another guy there who led it, and it was a beautiful ceremony, and that was the best one that I think I've had, where I've gotten the best results from. So yeah, I think it is super important, because it's like you said, it pushes you to grow, to make that extra effort that where you wouldn't otherwise if you were doing it by yourself. So it's super important. I like it. That's a good one that I didn't think of.
It holds you accountable, I feel like, if you're in a community. So and that's what I feel like community is supposed to help you do as well. It holds you accountable, helps you to grow. I mean, your word is all you have. So if you can't even do what you say you're going to do, I mean, what are you doing?
Yeah, exactly. We kind of started that question with Dustin, and he went through it. But is there anything else you'd like to add? Any challenges, Dustin, that you face in the modern day with dealing with your practices?
Honestly, I think she came full circle when it came to that community topic. Yeah, most definitely. For years and years, again, same as myself, interested, knowledge, and then as Nathaniel said, you can read about the descriptions and of sandwich, but you can't really experience it until you experience it. When it came to community, I was solo practitioner because there is so many. There's a lot of bullshit out there. There's a lot of things that are just far off, and there's like zero source backing it up. Like, where did you come up with this? You'll find a lot of misinformation, 10 to 1, before you find anything that's worth some real sustenance. So I just stayed away from all that, practiced alone for a long time, and then when it came to going overseas, it's like, well, in order to keep this pagan community open, which there was only like 6 people that were showing up, in order to keep this open, or for myself to continue attending this sort of thing, I had to either step in and keep it afloat, or step back and let it collapse. So I found a community when I was overseas, and originally starting off, there was here and there. They would show up, and then by the time that I had left, there was 26 that were pretty routinely there, like once a week, and a lot of it stemmed off of great knowledge, correct knowledge, good information passed by your channel, and then the hard work and dedication to actually search these topics, reference them, that they're actually correct sources, and then do even more study to make sure you're not going to pass the wrong information to someone else. So community, I found when I was over there, and now that I've returned back home, it's a bit different. It's great to have them there because they bring us up to a level that we otherwise wouldn't know. And at the same time, all knowledge is good knowledge, but if it's not shared knowledge, what's the point of having it in the first place? Sort of a thing. So by passing good knowledge, by getting good knowledge and seeing build themselves up to a strong point in life, that's a beautiful thing, regardless of who and what, when, where. So when I return back home, it's beautiful. Obviously, I have all the amenities and the freedoms and all the things that I was missing when I was over there. But the one thing that I miss now is that community that I once had.
Yeah, that's great. Yes, I could say we all face that problem, I guess. But yeah, there are things we can do to make that better in the future. Yeah, so we've been going now, guys, for like an hour and a half. We can finish it, but yeah, does anyone like short, quick questions that we want to cover, or does anyone make any closing statements? Whatever, you can leave it up to you guys. I've got nothing else.
So I just want to add a quick something. Ryan, you were saying how you're building your practice based on experience. A lesson that Peter Whitefeather tells me over and over and over again. He repeats it 5 million times. And I'm sure when we have him on as a guest down the line, he's going to repeat it 5 million times again. Everything is based on action and reaction. How you feel, how that interaction is with the spirits. Athena, you were totally right about the community and all that stuff. And by pushing your boundaries, because once you push and you go through those hard things, you shed versions of you no longer need, and you bring in transformation. And I am 100% confident that Nathan is going to break us from the Matrix one day.
If they don't get them first,
There is no sandwich. You taste the sandwich. It's not there.
we got to protect Nathan. Nathaniel, sorry.
Yeah.
Same difference.
Forget Schrodinger's cat. It's Nathaniel Sandwich from now on.
Okay, is that the title? Is that the title of the episode? Nathaniel's Sandwich.
I like that.
We can do that.
It could be.
God,
Anything else?
No, I think we're good. I think we hit all of some really good topics. Everybody got a chance to explain not only themselves but break themselves out of their shell. And we got a lot of stuff that we can probably spin off of and do at least an episode on each of us and some of the things from there. So some good thoughts to reflect on and get ourselves together and prepare for the next one, I'd say.
I do
Sounds
have
good.
one thing I want to add, because it was about the community part that Athena brought up and then others have touched on since she brought it up and whatnot. I was raised inside of a community with it. All right, so I had that going for me. But at some point, in order to really know what your own voice is, what your own experience is, you need to step away from it, even if it's just temporarily, to sort things out for yourself. Every great spiritual teacher will tell you that this is the case for it. To stop listening to them and what they're saying and just go and do your own thing. And you might have to go be a hermit for a while, so to speak, not necessarily an actual one, but one that's away from the community in order to make it so that way you can have the experience of the sandwich that we're talking about earlier and whatnot. Like you yourself, instead of continuously listening to what somebody else or what the community is telling you to do with it. In the beginning stages, you absolutely need to go and do this. But that's the whole point of the initiate's journey. That's the whole point of like the hero's journey. They're the same thing. It's for you to step out on your own. Go and do your own thing eventually once you've been armed well enough and understand things with it, and then bring back to the community what you found yourself with it and help them out as well and whatnot. Which is why I left the group that I did for a long time. That's part of the reason why I moved 3,000 miles away, 5,000 kilometers for anybody listening to this in Europe later on and whatnot, to where I am now, to get away from that and really explore who I was and who I am on my own and do things that particular way with it. And now that I've had certain experiences and that I've done certain things with it, what am I doing? I'm taking that knowledge and I'm putting it out there again in the form of my own personal podcast. And of course, this one here that I've agreed to on with everybody. So that's the one final thing I want to say about that.
Perfect. A good way to end it. All right, thank you all for being here. And for the viewers at home, stay tuned for the next one. That once we get these rolling, I hope to have one released every week or two. But that was a great first episode, and thank you guys for being here.
Absolutely. Thank you.
All right.